Hi, this is TJ from TJ's Art, and today we're decorating plastic eggs from the dollar store. Mine came in a package of 12. They were marked as Easter eggs. This project, I covered a thin layer of scrap clay that I'd ran through the pasta machine to flatten. It's a medium thin layer. But first, let me show you how to prepare your egg. Using my fingers, I'll spread a thin layer of the Genesis Heat Set Medium over the shell. Use a thin clay sheet. Mine is rolled out at a level 3 on my atlas. I find it easier to close the egg to cover it with clay. Start with the sheet of clay by pressing it into the heat set. It should adhere pretty easily. Keep the clay flat by removing the excess clay. You can tear the sheet or use scissors or a blade, whatever works best for you. Try not to overlap the clay too much, but a little overlapping is okay. Place the sheet onto the egg, and sliding it up against the other piece helps to avoid overlapping the edges. You can also cut along the overlapping clay with an xacto knife to remove the excess. Here I'm just using small pieces to finish covering the egg. Once the egg is completely covered, flatten and smooth the clay using an acrylic block. You could also roll it with the palms of your hands, smoothing out areas with your fingers. Next, grab a straight blade or an X-Acto knife to cut apart and open the egg. My egg has a little hinge on it, so I slide my blade near the hinge, then run my blade along the inside edge. Take your time. My blade is really dull, so there's no chance that I'll cut myself, but if your blade is sharp, be very careful. The slower you go, the safer it will be. Going back to our project, my egg is covered with a thin layer of scrap clay. I've already cut it open, and the next step will be to randomly stamp a pattern into it. I've sprayed water on my work surface, and I've run my stamp through it. Go ahead and open the egg. Your eggs may look a little different than mine, but most likely they will have a little hole or several. We're going to poke a hole in our clay to allow the heat from the baking to escape. I'm using a pointy tool to poke through the clay, then use my fingers to press the clay down. Next, I'll place this egg on a piece of cardstock and a tile. Cover it with aluminum foil for 15 minutes. Bake at your clay's recommended temperature and allow it to cool. I've conditioned a sheet of gold premo clay and I've run it through my pasta machine at a level 4 on my Atlas, or it's about a medium thin setting. I'm using an all-over pattern textured sheet. I spray my texture sheet with water and place the clay over it and run it through my pasta machine at a number 2 on my Atlas, or a wider setting. My clay is still a bit wet from stamping it, so I'll dry it using a paper towel. I flip the texture sheet to the back side. The clay is thin enough that I can see the pattern through it. I'll add the Genesis heat set to the patterned areas. Okay, that should do it. Let me clean up my space. Next, I can feel the hinge on the back side of the egg, so I'm placing the clay towards the front of the egg. It's important to choose a pattern that the excess clay can be cut away from. This leaf pattern works fine. So I take my time to find the area I want to cut around with my X-Acto knife. I press the clay to adhere to the egg and then I cut out that section. I'm not trying to be precise at this moment. I leave a small space between my cut and the leaf. Let's get closer so we can see better. So I'm slowly pressing the clay into the egg and cutting around the pattern, removing the excess clay, then moving to a new area. I'll keep doing this until the whole egg is covered. If this is too challenging, you could try cutting around the pattern on your work surface and simply place the cut pieces on the egg. I just find for me the leaf shape stays put better for me if I cut it on the egg, but do whatever is easier for you. I want space between my leaves so that the background shows through. I keep this in mind as I continue to cover the egg. I press down the cut edges so that they are smooth and not sticking up. I'm just taking my time to cut around the leaf pattern and removing the clay as I go. If your clay sheet starts getting in the way, simply cut it off and work with the clay already attached to the egg. Once I have the excess clay removed, I can go back in and cut more detailed and cut closer to the pattern. Cutting out the inside areas is where the design really starts to take shape. I alternate between cutting out excess clay and cutting the details area. The goal is to have a nice balance of gold pattern and the background showing through. Next, I'm going to cut out an area of the pattern. Add the medium to the back. And place it on the egg. I press it down with my fingers. Once it's all adhere, I repeat the cutting out again. Once I've cut out the pattern, I'll use sculpting tools to add more interest and details to the pattern edges. I'm using the ball stylus to smooth down the clay edges. I shape the raw clay by pushing into the straight edges. This creates curves and adds interest to the design. I also use the sculpting tools to retrace areas in the pattern that may have gotten smushed earlier. Just take your time and enjoy the process. Covering the egg in several steps and baking multiple times will help you to avoid distorting your pattern. Okay, now you have the steps down. Just keep repeating the steps until you finish covering about half of your egg. This is important. Make sure to run your blade along the opening before you bake. You don't want to bake your egg shut. Once you've done that step, then you can bake for 15 minutes at your recommended temperature and then allow to cool. After your egg has cooled, continue adding decorative areas until you are satisfied with the arrangement. Feel free to move ahead in the video if you'd like. I just wanted to show the process in detail so you understand what's involved. If you have any questions about your pattern, send me an image and I'll be happy to help you with it. Check to find areas of the clay that have overlapped the opening and cut it apart. Then bake the egg again, making sure the clay isn't touching between the top and bottom sections. Bake again for 15 minutes and allow to cool. The final step is to add a patina or age the egg. We'll use paint to do that. You can use either acrylic paint or oil paint. Generally, we don't mix oil and acrylic paint, but if you add the oil paint first, you'll be fine. You may want to put on some rubber gloves if you don't want paint on your hands. I'm using a toothbrush, but you could use a paintbrush. I'm brushing it over most of the areas, but leaving some areas without any paint. Then I'll go back over the missed areas with the crimson color. Next, I'll start wiping off the excess paint. I'm using a paper towel, but notice it's starting to shred, so I switched to a towel. The last layer of paint is acrylic, and it's the lightest color. I'll clean off my toothbrush. A clean paintbrush would be ideal, but I'm working with what I have handy. Acrylic dries fairly quickly, so get it on, then remove the excess before it dries. I'm putting it on in random areas. Then remove most of it with a towel. You may need to add a little water to help remove the paint if it started to dry. Congratulations, you finished the decorative egg project. Here's a few more ideas for you to experiment with. I'd love to see what you create. Thanks for watching.